arguably the two most important things on my side. How do you get the motherfucking money, and how do you get deal flow? Nobody goes to. So don't give me that fucking look of disdain like, oh, fuck, that's the only thing I go to.
First taping of my audio newsletter this evening will be on creating a deal flow. What do I mean by a deal flow? A deal flow is a series of transactions that come in to my offices for me. Now, how did I get that deal flow? When you go out and you try to implement QLA, quantum leap methodology, quantum leap advantage methodology, one of the first problems that you will have is creating a deal flow. How do I get people to recognize me as a shaker and mover? How do I get people to show me businesses that are for sale, to show me businesses that are that I can purchase? And the way that this is done is that, one, you are who you hang around with. I get a lot of deals, notwithstanding I've been in this business for 25 years and I originally am from Wall Street. I get a lot of deals brought to me because people know that I do deals. Now, for those of you that are neophytes in the audience, and most of you are, you will not have that reputation. So why would a banker, why would an accounting firm, why would a law firm bring you a deal? They probably wouldn't. Therefore, by joining up in a joint venture fashion with somebody that has an existing track record, if this gentleman in the front row and I go into business together on a joint venture, whether it's 90, 10, 50, 50, 60, 40, my track record automatically goes to him. If these two gentlemen in the front row go into business and this gentleman has a track record for doing business, automatically he assimilates, he acquires the track record of this gentleman here. The way that you acquire deal flow is by going in the initial stages, when you go out and are implementing quantum leap advantage methodology, is by attracting somebody to be your partner. Now, in the early days of my career, one of my first joint venture partners was a gentleman named Konstantin Gratsos, who was the chief executive officer of Onassis Shipping Lines. He was the right-hand man of Aristotle Onassis. If you read any of the books about Aristotle Onassis, you'll read about Konstantin Gratsos. They were born on the same little island in Greece, and they were best friends 65 years. And when Mr. Onassis passed away, he assumed the position of chief executive officer. He was the trustee of the Christine Onassis Trust. Well, early in my business career, in the late 70s, I had the privilege of meeting Mr. Gratsos. Mr. Gratsos liked me. He took me under his wing. We became joint venture partners. His track record, the track record of Onassis Shipping Lines, at that time, one of the biggest corporations on the planet, for sure in the United States, I acquired that. So my deal flow was Mr. Gratsos' deal flow. So one of the ways when you go out and you read these books by some of the other writers, some of the other gurus, some of the other speakers, the basis of being successful in using their programs is being able to do transactions. But before you can do transactions, people have to show you transactions. People have to show you companies. People have to be able to think that you're within the universe of individuals that can actually get deals done. The only way that can happen is if, in the initial stages, you partner up with somebody. Dave Reeker and Jose Alvarez, our other partner in the same transaction, in Great Wisdom Books, have acquired my track record. You read my profile, which is fairly lengthy. For starters, it lists the governments I've done business with. The British government, the Japanese government, the Yemen government, the Chilean government, the Netherlands government, the Kuwaiti government, the Canadian government, the United States government, the British government, Israeli government, that's right, I'm forgetting some of them. Okay, by definition, those transactions that I've done with those governments accrue to Mr. Reeker and Mr. Alvarez. By definition, they're players. Now, I'm not saying that you have to get somebody like me, but you've got to get somebody that's more than you, for sure. That is the first step. Not the first step, one of the first steps. Another step is to be represented by a Big Six accounting firm, because Big Six accounting firms by definition, will bring you deals. Last night, at my home, I went to dinner with Paul Hastings, one of the fifth or sixth largest law firm in the country. They got 450 or 500 lawyers. Excuse me. Dave Reeker went to dinner with Paul Hastings. I went to dinner with O'Melveny and Myers, which also represents me, that has 500 or 600 lawyers. And one of the questions that I had, another partner of mine, Cinda Burke, who's AKA, also known as the Butcher of Phoenix, who's a little young woman about this tall, who was a pre-med student at Cornell and graduated and decided she wanted to go on to medical school and be a doctor, and so she's out in business, and she's almost 26 years old, and we're in partnership together. We're consolidating the mobile home park industry, and she called me this morning because I used to be in the energy business, and she says, Peabody Coal owns this huge trailer park. Like I'm supposed to know somebody at Peabody Coal. I don't know anybody. But I got on the phone, I called Arthur Anderson, who represents me, Deloitte Touche, who represents me, Coopers and Lybrand, who represent me, O'Melveny and Myers, Warren Christopher's firm, our Secretary of State, who represents me, Paul Hastings, who represents me, Richards Butler, one of the largest law firms in here, who represents me. And I said, put on your email, I want to know who the hell at Peabody Coal is in charge of their real estate portfolio, because we want to buy their mobile home park. That's how you get deal flow. This is why I recommend strongly, and I suggest strongly. When I say suggest, I mean, suggest means, you moron, if you don't do this, somebody ought to cut your head off with an axe. When I say suggest, that's what I mean. I would suggest strongly, and there's a reason why you pay 30 or 40% premium for big six accounting firms and huge international law firms. And the only reason that you pay those kinds of premiums is because for their connections. When I needed to do business in Chile with the former president of Chile, the dictator of Chile, Pinochet, I called Coopers and Lybrand. They got me an appointment with the Minister of Energy, and I ultimately met the president. It wasn't that I created the deal flow. It was Coopers and Lybrand. Yet most of you have been trained, one, to use your brother-in-law, the lawyer, or your cousin who's a CPA. If anybody that you know calls your accountant a CPA, he's a moron. Coopers and Lybrand are not called CPAs. Deloitte Touche are not called CPAs. Arthur Anderson is not called a CPA. Most of you in this room, to the extent that you have accountants, have CPAs. Or your cousin, fifth cousin, twice removed as your lawyer. Joe Schwartz, single proprietor, operating out of his bedroom. This is not how you create a deal flow. You create a deal flow by being represented by Warren Christopher, the Secretary of State's law firm, O'Melveny and Myers, who has represented me a lot of years. And you wonder why you've had difficulty, perhaps, looking at transactions. You hear me talk a lot about transactions. I am not a proponent of internal growth. All the big money that I've made, and all the big money that of my contemporaries, the Ross Perot's of this world, have been made mostly externally, exponentially, by acquisition. Now, there are key questions that you ask people that will represent you to create a deal flow. One, when was the last time you did a deal? Two, I'd like you to give me 3, 4, or 5 recommendations or references of people that you have done deals with. Now, this will eliminate, those first 2 questions will eliminate 90% of anybody that you do business with. One, they haven't done a deal. And 2, well, if they haven't done a deal, they don't have anybody that they can give you as a reference. Banks should be able to give you references on deal flows. When was the last time, and don't raise your hand, please, when was the last time any of you have ever asked your banker to recommend how you can do deals? It's not heard of, because most of you have what I call deposit relationships. You deposit money, they sometimes pay you interest. They give you no service. Most of you have deposit relationships. Deal flow, without transaction flow, Quantum leap advantage methodology is dead. Not only is quantum leap advantage methodology dead, virtually any aggressive exponential growth methodology is dead. It's about attracting the ambiance, the social and economic milieu of a shaker and mover. We are who we hang around with. We are what we think about. Now, if that were true, I would be a human organ, because in most of my life as a male, I thought about one thing. And I would be an organ today, and it would not be a male organ. I know for sure that you do not become what you think about. Most. I can attest to that. But as Napoleon Hill talked about in his book, Think and Grow Rich, and it's one of the 6 or 7 books that I recommend that you read, he talked about a thing called sexual transmutation. And that's taking your sex drive as a man. He didn't talk about women, because he didn't talk about women when he wrote the book. That sex drive as a man, and you're just shifting it. I understand. We can talk later. We can talk later. You shift it from your drive as a man, your sex drive, into business. And that's essentially what I did these many years ago. Now, I have 3 mentors. 2 that are still alive. Costa Grazos has passed away a number of years ago. And my 2 mentors that are living, by definition, I've acquired their track record. Now, it so happens that my success has superseded, not superseded, but has grown larger than my 2 mentors. But early in my career, the deal flows that I had in the energy business and various other businesses that I've been in were primarily responsible to my association with my 2 mentors. For those of you that don't have mentors, I would suggest that you get them. You might ask how you get them, and you get them by picking up the phone. You get them by reading in the newspaper. You get them in calling them. You get them by aggressively wanting to be a high-performance person. As a sidebar comment, I would be remiss if I didn't say that 95% of the people that talk about being successful, it's kind of like, some of you are old enough to remember this, in the 60s and 70s, you could go to a very nice cocktail party and people would be smoking dope, grass. And I'm not a proponent of that. People used to do drugs in the 60s and 70s. People now talk about being or going to motivational seminars, reading motivational books, because it's vogue now in the 90s. How many of those people that talk about that really sincerely want to be successful? I'm here to tell you an infinitesimal amount. Close to zero. Close to zero. But it's vogue. It's vogue now to talk about that stuff. It's vogue to come and listen to people, not like me, because you've never heard anybody like me, but it's vogue to go to seminars and buy books and buy tapes and all that crap that you do. I don't do that, but I mean, a lot of people do. So, to create your deal flow, 1, it's who you're represented by, your lawyers and accountants. 2, who you hang around with. 3, your really sincere, innate desire to be a high-performance person and be successful. And being successful, ladies and gentlemen, doesn't come cheap. Creating deal flow isn't cheap. If you're using Arthur Andersen or Melvin and Myers, you are paying 30 to 40% more than you need to or have to for accounting and legal bills. Pure and simple. What do you get for it? Well, I've already alluded to that. You get first-class representation, 1, and you get the opportunity to be exposed to the things that will help your business grow. For those of you that don't, how many have businesses or have been in business? How many are just thinking about going out on your own in business? Okay. For the latter group, it's critically important that you get off on the right foot. And the way you get out on the right foot is to have that kind of representation. Now, there is the difference between long-term deal flow and short-term deal flow. Short-term deal flow is some of you are going to keep in contact with one another after tonight. Long-term deal flow is that you're actually going to do something about the reason you were asked here. For those of you that think you can go to a $189 seminar and learn the same as a $20,000 seminar, you're sick and need help. In fact, I would suggest to you that there's a bus that comes by here at 11:15. I'll buy you drinks till 11:15, and that you throw yourself under the leading wheels. Because that's crap. That's not going to happen. It just isn't. What are the, we've alluded to some of the key questions that we ask professionals, and that's, when did you do deals, how many deals have you done, etc. But at the end of the day, it's a chemistry that you have between the professionals or don't have that will tell you. I can, and Dave and some of the other people that have been to meetings with me in the audience know that I pretty much can guess what's going to happen. Of course, I'm experienced. I have made almost 60,000 business decisions in my career, 25 years, and we're not talking about pencils and paper. And I've only been I've only been right about 35,000 times, so I've been wrong about 25,000 times. I've made over 330 or 40 one-on-one financial presentations on 5 continents on the planet. Why have I only been to 5 continents? Because there's only money on 5. The other 2 don't have spit. Otherwise, I'd be there too. I've traveled millions and millions and millions of miles on airplanes. I was one of the first million-mile Advantage American Airlines, whatever that program's called, in the early 80s. I've made over 250,000 business calls. I've spent close to 10,000 nights traveling, or days, not nights, traveling. I've been in over 5,000 meetings. That's how you create deal flow. Most of you in this room are not willing to pay that price to action. For those of us that are overweight in the room, we know how to lose weight. Less calories, more exercise, right? Well, then why are there so many lard asses in the room? Do you have to be Einstein to figure out how to lose weight? The answer is no, because we don't want to bad enough, right? It's the same in business. Now, when you're talking to these people about deal flow, your initial contact is extremely important. You only have one time to make a first impression. Now, I'm going to give you 2 scenarios. One, I would have come in here with green hair, my hair slicked back, and my, well, I hardly look like James Dean, because James Dean's about this tall. But, I mean, wearing a Hawaiian shirt, we're close to the beach, or drunk, or barefooted, or without socks. Now, you would have had a distinct impression of me. The same is for the people that you expect deals to come from. Most of you in this room are not dressed to attract deal flow. I tell people, I don't care, because I have business in the South, in Florida, and they say, what's different in Florida? That's bullshit. It's different in Palm Springs. It's different in Cardiff by the Sea, Airy Ferry, San Diego. That's crap. Have you ever seen a head of state on TV that wasn't wearing other than some of the African countries, have you ever seen a head of state on TV that wasn't wearing a suit? Okay. Have you ever seen a head of state wear a double-breasted suit? Who? No, I don't think so. No. They all have the Brooks Brothers look. No crap on your shoes, no tassels. White shirt. Now, I'm wearing cufflinks, which I wouldn't normally do, but this group's not smart enough to realize that you shouldn't wear cufflinks, so I wore cufflinks tonight. But they all look alike. Ross Perot dresses Rick Scott, who's the CEO of Columbia Healthcare, used to be my lawyer. Rick Scott, they all look alike, except for the Bransons and a few people that are considered mavericks. For you to be considered seriously in what we're talking about, and for the women, whatever women corresponding dress is business suit. Now, I can just see you in a Brooks Brothers suit with a tie. See? I can see that because my successful female partners dress, and this is probably an embarrassing thing to say, they dress like me, which you can take that either way. I mean it in a positive sense. They dress conservatively. And if you don't dress conservatively, I can assure you your deal flow, your opportunity, in closing before I open it up to questions, look at it this way. It's your opportunity to become a high-performance person and be wealthy. Now, wealth, money is not the only benchmark. I understand that. In my career, it's the only benchmark that anybody keeps track of. Period. It's the I'm here and you're listening to me because I turned $800 into $425 million in 8 years when energy prices went from $40 a barrel to $8 a barrel. Otherwise, nobody'd be here. It's not because I'm a kind human being. It's not because I'm generous, which I am. It's not because I'm loving sometimes. Lights have to be down and I have to be in the horizontal position. But, I mean, it's not because of those things. It isn't. You're here because I've been mega successful, and more importantly, I've trained countless other people to be mega successful. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. We are now going to open it up to my fun time. This is special time, as my children would say. And I am married to the same woman for 23 years. I've been married 3 times to the same woman. We've renewed our vows twice. I have a 14-and-a-half-year-old son who's going on 30. I have a 13-year-old son who's going on 9. And I have a 9-year-old daughter who's going on 40. And so that part of my life is fairly normal. We're going to open it up to questions. And raise your hand. The mic will come to you. By the way, the reason that normally, because for edit expense, I use athletic metaphors and sexual metaphors. Why? Well, looking at this audience, I'm not so sure everybody understands the sexual metaphors. But I know you understand the athletic ones. At least the guys do. Okay? And maybe some of you understand the sexual metaphors. But that's why I do those 2 metaphors. Because everybody understands them. Oh, almost everybody. Okay. Raise your hand if you've got questions. I'll come and drag some questions. This young lady in the front row.
And you said something about 2 mentors. Would that be Jerry Orman and Jim Stewart, and how would one go about meeting them?
Jerry Orman and Jim Newman. Jim Newman lives in North Hollywood. He's semi-retired. His name's in the book, phone book. He was my mentor for getting my head screwed on straight. He's still a good friend of mine. He wrote a book one of the books I recommend. It's called Release Your Brakes. How many have driven a car with the emergency brake on in your lifetime? Now, see, now the young kids, because you can't drive with the emergency brake on now. Okay, now when you drive with the emergency brake on, the car is sluggish, right? It's bad for the brakes, it's bad for the transmission, it's bad for the universal joint, everything. And when you pull that emergency brake deal off, what happens? The car surges with power. Most of us, and this is one of the premises of his philosophy, most of us through our lives have been going through life with the emergency brake on. Women have the emergency brake on more than men. Keep your legs together, don't chew gum, you'll look like a slut, all the crap that you're raised as a woman growing up, which is mostly crap. Now, I have a daughter who, unfortunately, they say is a little me. Now, it's hard for me to imagine a woman me. Of course, Lucinda Burke is very much like I am, and I'm old enough to be her father, the young woman that I talked about earlier. But it's releasing that baggage that we've been trained with. More women for women than men. And his book helped me redefine my definition for success. He's a great public speaker. He's a great guy. Another one of his proteges is Dennis Waitley. He's got a stable. Jim Newman's stable is second to none. I believe he's coached the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I mean, just virtually IBM. He came out of IBM about the same time Ross Perot did. Jerry Orman's my other mentor. He lives in Bel Air. I believe Jerry's name's in the book as well. He lives on the 9th hole of Bel Air Country Club. He's like a second father to me and my wife. He's a great guy. He was my mentor in the energy business. And most of the mistakes I didn't make were because of Jerry Orman. Another question. Jose.
Dan, one thing that you mentioned is about deal flow, but what a lot of people probably don't seem to understand is sometimes they'll go try to do one deal, doesn't work, and they stop. And
Correct.
Obviously, you know, it takes a lot more than one deal sometimes to make
Correct.
something.
You will have to try, unless you're extremely fortunate, you will have to try 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 before you do one. It's like, you've heard the story, if you stand on a corner and you ask enough women, will you go to bed with me, one will say yes. Right? You've heard that. Well, I've actually seen that happen before. I know I was on the corner 55th and something in Manhattan, and a friend of mine that will remain nameless because his wife may get a hold of this tape, the 16th woman that went by, he got spit on, slapped, kicked, but the 16th woman said, your place or mine. If you ask enough people to loan you money, if you ask enough people, can I buy your company? Somebody will say yes. What happens in life is that we ask 1 or 2 or 3, and then we stop because the fear of rejection and all the things that are inherent, lack of self-esteem, lack of self-confidence. High-performance people have a great deal of self-confidence. Nobody loves Dan Pena more than Dan Pena. If my wife were here today, she would say, I worship the ground Dan walks on, but my love for Dan compared to Dan's love for himself is transitory. It's non-existent. All the high-performance people that I know and all the high-performance people that I've alluded to all have, unfortunately, for a lot of us, huge egos, but we all like ourselves a great deal. It's extremely difficult. It's not impossible, but it's extremely difficult to be a high-performance person and not like yourself. And not everybody likes himself. Next question. Dave.
Dan, I'm in the process of acquiring any type of company, and I have my professionals that are pulling deals my way. Is there some things that I can do to step it up, to proactively hunt for companies? Any suggestions that I can take?
Yeah. The Wall Street Journal, the Business Journal, the major newspapers, the New York Times, the LA Times if you're here, whatever state, the Houston Chronicle if you're from Houston, Texas. All those newspapers, the LA Business Journal, the Houston Business Journal, the San Francisco Business Journal, those business journals that are in most of the major cities are all conduits of transactions. You've got to call them, though. You cannot put them under your pillow and by osmosis, these people will know that you want to do business and they will call. That won't happen. At least it hasn't happened to me because I've tried that method 20 or 25 years ago. That method doesn't work. There are, in addition to the accounting firms, the law firms, etc., that we talked about, there are the investment banking firms, the brokerage firms, most of which will work on a contingency basis and funnel you deals. We have a guy named Lenny Knock, who's a pilot for U.S. Air. His claim to fame is that he was the Bachelor of the Month 5 or 6 years ago in Cosmopolitan. And this is a guy about 2'6". And how he ever got to be Bachelor of the Month, the level of macho men in the country is not what it used to be, I guess. But I mean, this guy has put together an investment. Forgive me, Lenny, because you'll be listening to this. I'm exaggerating what you look like a little to make a point. But this guy's put together an investment banking team with no money and a deal flow with no money better than I did 20 years ago, and I came out of Wall Street. I came out of Bear Stearns. KKR fellows came out 10 months before I did. And for those of you, KKR, Nabisco, and the bright guys. But you can find people. I mean, I listen to CNN and various programs on television, and if I see something that's interesting, I'll ask one of my assistants to call them, see if we can get their number so I can talk to them. But you have to be proactive. You have to kiss a lot of frogs. 95% of your time should be in search of deals and or finance. Next question. Yes, ma'am. Wait.
My question is, how does a woman who needs to be conservative in appearance and aggressive in style and carry the baggage she has and deal with the baggage that men will put on?
Not easily.
Okay.
The way
Details.
you do it is, number one, my recommendation to women, not just women, but especially women, find a female or male mentor that has been there, done that. Not somebody that's talked about it, written about it, lectured about it, but has actually physically done it. Number one. Number two, hang around with high-performance people. Most people that you meet at seminars, with the exception of our seminars, aren't high performance. They're groupies. They're the kind of people that follow the Dodgers around, basically. Read the 4 or 5 or 6 books, in my judgment, that are the best books vis-a-vis being a high-performance person. And I'll tell you some of them right now. One is Tough-Minded Management by Joe Batten. Some of you may not know who Joe is. Joe, for starters, is the mentor of Ross Perot, which is pretty strong by itself. Release Your Brakes by Jim Newman. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Magic Words by Ted Nicholson, the best marketing guy on the planet. He's a very dear friend of mine, and he's the second most successful guy in this business after me. He's actually made money in the real world, and he's on a board of ours. In fact, Dave Rieker's board and Jose's and Great Wisdom Books. The MAX strategy. MAX strategy. Is it Dalton or Dutton? D-A-U-T-E-N. Yeah. And later this year, my book, which doesn't have a title yet. But those kinds of books by people that have actually done it. Okay, another question.
Initial stages of your deal, whether it be acquiring other businesses or developing a new product idea you might have before you're actually making sales and generating cash flow.
Yes.
How do you make it through that time to pay the expenses of the business as well as your necessary expenses to make it to the first stage?
With great difficulty. I mean, some of you know I started with $820, a lease fax machine, and a phone. I had my oldest son had just been born, and I had no money. And you learn that they don't repossess your house or foreclose until you're at least, I think it's 3 payments behind. I know these things. Fortunately, it hasn't happened to me in a long time, but I know these things. I know that you can still go out and get credit cards, even if you're maxed out and you've got crappy credit. You can still go get credit cards. I mean, I know these things. I know that you can buy real estate and a lot of things with credit cards. And it's even easier now. My 13-year-old son has a MasterCharge that has a $15,000 limit. My oldest son has an American Express card. He's 14, almost 15. They send them in the mail. My kids sign them. And you're supposed to have a Social Security number. And if my kids have one, I don't know about it. I mean, it's easy. I mean, if I filled out or my staff filled out all the credit card applications I get in a year, I'd easily have 100, I'm sure. And that's what you do. But if you don't believe, see, this is a subject of another tape, but you can see I'm passionate about what I talk about. I don't have to be here. And when I retired 4 years ago, and I decided 3 years ago to go into this business, I decided to go into this business because I wanted to change the way success information is disseminated on the planet. Because I was so appalled that 99.5% of the stuff that you people buy, listen, is shit. It just is. By know-nothing losers that have never done anything but suck the money out of your purses and your wallets. That's why I'm doing this. I wrap my career around this passion that I have, my unique selling proposition, and the day that I'm not the most successful success coach on the planet, I will retire. Period. But it galls me to have people like you and you and you, them take your money and give you back crap. If you saw how these bums lived, I was going to do an infomercial where I know where everybody lives. and I know how they live. And I was going to have a camera go to all their houses and show you the 57 Chevy on blocks with the engine outside on the guy's front lawn. If you knew what I knew about these bums and how they have disdain for you, that they can't stand looking at your faces because they think you're morons, if you knew what I knew, you'd have permanent diarrhea. They think you're a joke. They laugh at you. When I got into the inner circle of these gurus, it made my skin crawl. They think you're chumps because they've never made a goddamn dime and they know it. That you spend $1,000, $500, $7,000, $15,000. You buy their tapes for $2,000. Their books for $40. That's why I got into this business. And yet some of you this week will go out and buy some bum's book. I will guarantee my life on it. Because they sell you half-truths and misinformation, and that's easier for you to swallow than the goddamn truth. That it's hard as hell to make a lot of money. And anybody that tells you any different is full of... It's a bitch. On that happy note, any other questions before we close down? Mike, for the... go ahead.
Dan, you talked about cultivating incoming deal flow. Would you recommend any direct solicitation methods as well?
Oh, direct marketing, letters. For people that go to our seminars, we have put together a package of successful letters that have worked, successful phone solicitations that have actually worked, that people like Dave Reeker, Bruce Whipple, Lucinda Burke, Danny Taylor, to name some of the people that have gone through the seminar that happen to be my partners, that have actually they've made them work. And it's the simple stuff that works. It's not the highfalutin baloney that works. It's the simple stuff. And but I mean, direct marketing, which I'm not a guru at. Ted Nicholas is. I would defer to him, and he's a great seminar to go to. Ted's seminar on marketing is and self-publishing and a couple of the other things that he teaches are he's excellent. But he's like I think his unique selling proposition is he spent $200 or $300 million in direct marketing campaigns of his own money. Well, if you spend $200 or $300 million of your own money, I mean, you just think about it. You don't have to be Einstein to figure this out. Okay? Thank you very much. Let's wrap it. You've been a good audience.